Hello, and welcome to an intro to Anthro with two humans. I'm human number one, John McCray.
And I'm human number two, John Lehr.
And this is the podcast where we reassess what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. And the title of this episode is Piltdown Meltdown, Anthropological Hoaxes, Fakes, and Folderols. And John, you've known me my entire life. You know that there's nothing I love more than Folderol. I just love it.
That is true. It was your CB handle back when CBs were big. It wasn't a great handle. It was hard to understand over the static. I had to turn the squelch way up.
Right. I spent most of my time on the CB explaining what Folderol because
truckers aren't into that so much.
Very few. Anyway, I would say a large part of my life. I mean, a Folderol is sort of a trivial nonsense, I guess is what you would say. And I've spent a large part of my life investigating Folderol, and you might even say my life is a Folderol. I don't know. Maybe the dancer has become the dance. But anyway,
I mean, if you're going to go there, I think now we're getting into nihilism, and I think we're all on board at the end.
Right. Okay. Needless to say, Folderol has played a big part of my life, and just to give you a quick background of this episode's topic. A couple of years ago, my wife, Mary, subscribed to the New Yorker. And, like a lot of people, we put the magazines in the bathroom. So if you're taking a bath or doing other business.
It's the other business, let's be honest. But yes.
Exactly. And as you know, it's very hard to finish a New Yorker article in one sitting. I mean, they're very dense. Very dense,
They sure are.
Very well written.
Except for the cartoons, which is the only thing I read in them.
Right.
And half of those I don't understand.
Right. But we have a very large stack of New Yorkers in our bathroom right now. And my wife she's a completist. She starts watching a series. She wants to see every one of them. If she starts following an artist, she wants to listen to every album. And so she's slowly working her way through that stack of New Yorkers, reading everything. God, she's amazing. Yeah.
You are so lucky to be married to that woman.
Yeah, especially. Somebody who's into Folderol got lucky. But anyway, so a couple weeks ago, she came out of the bathroom, actually, and gave me an article that she had torn out of the New Yorker. And she said, "Is this a hoax?"
Oh boy!
And when I looked at it, it was an article from by Rebecca Mead back in May 2021. So that's how long it's. We're still working on 2021.
She's really behind.
Yeah,
and I behind is the. That's
She'll have to quit her job just to catch up on the New Yorker. But it was an article about the CERN Obus giant. Okay. And the CERN Obus giant, for those who don't know, is a chalk figure in southern England. And that's where they dig trenches in the outline of a figure. They fill it in with crushed white chalk. And it makes this very distinct white line.
Yes.
And there's a lot of chalk drawings in southern England. That's
why? Why? What is that?
I think it's, there's a lot of chalk down there, for one thing.
Okay, so you've got the resource.
Right. And I equate it to, how when you're driving across America and you're outside a small town and up on a hill somewhere, invariably the local high school or community college has painted some rocks with their initials.
Go Badgers! Yeah, right.
They're just trying to identify themselves, give the location, the place. That's who we are.
It's a shout to the universe. We are here.
Right. Exactly. So and so community college. We are here.
Just thousands of years ago.
Right. So, and there's a lot of them in southern England. Like there's the Long Man of Wilmington. There's a lot of horses. There's the Uffington White Horse. There's the Osmington White Horse.
Oh boy.
And then there's the Cerne Abbas Giant. Mm-hmm. And the Cerne Abbas Giant is a little bit unique for all of these drawings. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I'm not sure if you've ever seen him. If you have, it's Cerne, Cerne, and then Abbas, Abbas. There used to be an abbey in this town back in like 1000 AD.
And as always, we'll have links to
to
things in our
because
in our description.
Really, right. I'll try to describe it. I'll try to paint the picture with words.
Please.
So he's 180 feet tall.
Jesus.
He has a small round head, very long arms. He's holding a club, a very knobby club. He has eyebrows, which is pretty amazing myself. It brings it to life. He's got like just a little line for a mouth. He's ripped. You can see his six pack there.
Wow.
And it looks like he's wearing a belt. But what's the most amazing thing about the Cerne Abbas Giant is he has an enormous erect penis.
Yes, I knew this is where we were going.
For some reason, if he's 180 feet tall,
Jesus,
his penis is, archaeologists have gone out there. His penis is 26 feet long.
Okay. My God. Who's the graduate student had to measure that?
Oh,
hey, Keith, get up there.
Here's a tape measure.
Yeah.
Everybody else just at the bottom of the hill laughing.
How big
get
is
closer.
It? Just a minute.
And someone actually calculated that if this was drawn to scale, the penis would be 9 inches long.
Okay. Well, what's wrong? That's average, right?
Right.
It is for me.
Well, from your lips to God's ear is all I can say. But somebody said, I think it's because the archaeologists must have been a little intimidated because someone said, well, it looks like they incorporated what once was a belly button. In that case, he would have only been about 6 inches long. So they were trying
I'll take it. I mean, God.
So the reason it looks absurd. Like you look at it, I think Mary compared it to, she goes, it looks like an 8th grade boy has vandalized a Keith Haring painting. So that gives you some idea. It's full on erect with, everything. It's like what you would find in a bathroom.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there have been many theories about who did the Cerne Abbas Giant, and also the reason why they did the Cerne Abbas Giant. And
do you think it could have been just that? A teenager from back in the day just defacing?
Who it took a lot of work is the whole thing to do it. 180 feet tall, but
you ever TP'd a house? That takes a lot of work too. I know you have too.
It's a theory. Right. We could look into that. We could submit that to the Cerne Abbas Foundation. But one thing's for certain: the first person that ever wrote about Cerne Abbas was in 1694. So it's been there at least since 1694. Some people say, well, maybe it was a god of the old ancient Britons. Maybe it's going back I think it's the Uffington horse actually goes back to the Bronze Age. So some people were saying, well, maybe it was back to the Bronze Age. Other people said, well, maybe it's a representation of Hercules and it was put there by the Romans. Some people thought it was. Hercules sometimes he's represented with a club and with something in his arm, but.
Yeah, well, his own penis in his arm. But the Romans never drew eyebrows like those.
To me, it's like odd to have the eyebrows.
The eyebrows are odd because they spent more time on the eyebrows than the mouth.
Exactly.
Do you think his eyebrows are just being raised because he's like, "Oh my god, I'm fully
this is
erect.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, this is humiliating."
I mean, you have to look at. You can even go on Google Maps and Google the town of Cernobis, and you can see it from space or from the satellite. You can see the Cernobis giant.
That's what technology's for.
Right.
Right
there. To see this giant. And you can see it all. Let me just say you can see it all. Some people thought it was King George III who kind of compared himself to Hercules, again, coming back to Hercules. Some people thought it was Oliver Cromwell. And then some people even
always gets thrown in the mix, it seems like.
And some people were people who felt that it wasn't Cromwell was like, well, Cromwell was always known for his long hair. Mm-hmm. And this thing has a really small head with no hair. So
well, maybe the hair, maybe it's in the hair is covering the head, and that's why we only see it. Like maybe the hillside is the hair.
Ooh,
you know, see what I'm saying? And we're just seeing the part of his head that isn't covered by hair.
You have
They're using negative space.
You have a real gift for this. We need to get you a scholarship and get you back to get an advanced degree.
God damn right.
So the other thing that was kind of strange was that there was this abbey in the town. And so some people have said no one at the abbey has ever written about the Cernobis giant, even though you would be looking out your window and seeing this figure with this enormous, like the monks would be looking out at this figure with an enormous penis. But no one ever wrote about it.
That does seem odd because they would. Let's say maybe they didn't want to say it because it was so phallic and so pagan,
right?
Or they were offended by it.
Yeah.
Can you destroy it? Could it be destroyed?
It could be grown over. Like they think for some decades it was grown over, and then people went back in and dug it out again.
Oh, okay.
What's under there? But that's what this article was about. Was scientists and anthropologists recently have tried to figure out an exact date for the Cernobis giant. And what they did is they dug down into the chalk all the way down to the baseline soil level, meaning the soil level that's where the people who initially put him there, they went down to that level and then filled it in with chalk. And they did 2 tests on it. The first test was they did analysis on the types of snails that were at that level. Because, it's pretty interesting. But
that is interesting.
Snails, different types of snails were introduced in England at different times. And so you can look at what types of snails are at certain levels to say, like, okay, when they came down here, this snail's there. So it had to be after this period when that type of snail was.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. And the other thing they did was called optically stimulated luminescence, OSL.
You're telling me.
You got to do OSL.
That was my junior year of high school.
So what OSL does is it can measure the amount of radiation that a soil sample has when it was removed from daylight, when it was covered up.
Man.
And so the longer it was covered up, the higher the radiation level will be. That's kind of in a nutshell. It's a lot more, complicated than I don't really understand it. I know that you just order it. You just order somebody to do
the test, and you let some other people who understand it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a COVID test. I don't know, but I know I'm not COVID. I'm not positive.
Right. But anyway, when they did both of those tests, they realized that the Cernobis giant was medieval, probably from about 700 to 1100 AD or Common Era. So it wasn't from the Bronze Age.
Not that old.
But then again, it was also not a modern hoax, from like the 1700s. It was, so they have, to me, what's interesting is that our technology is getting good enough that we can actually get some confirmation on these mysteries that have eluded us for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
And when I was done, I kind of read it and explained it to Mary. She basically
Did you mansplain it?
I didn't think I was.
Were your legs crossed or open?
I was standing with my arms akimbo on a chair talking down to her. That's what, and I don't know why she seemed to have taken offense to it or whatever. But she said to me ultimately, after all of this, I kind of explained OSL, and she said, well, as an anthropologist and an archaeologist, is there any way you can answer a question for me? I go, yeah, I'll try to. And I go, what is it? And she goes, is he a grower or a shower? I realized I had been punked. It was a hoax. The whole argument was just to get her to say, so that she could say to me, is he a grower or a shower?
God, I love Mary.
But this got me thinking about hoaxes and anthropological hoaxes and mysteries. And like I said, I kind of include mysteries in there because there are a lot of artifacts and a lot of items, as they're hundreds of years old. Yes. People don't know if they were hoaxes, and we didn't have the technology. But now we're starting to get the technology where we can look at things and kind of put, just get some verification on it, at least for knowledge to know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that have been hoaxes, a lot of mysteries. There was the Cardiff Giant in 1860 in New York. Some guys were digging a well on a farm, and they found a 10-foot tall, stone carved man. And so people were like, oh, this was a race of ancient people that lived here in New York, or, maybe this is even a fossilized version of it. Within a year, that was a hoax.
Right.
They realized somebody had just carved him and planted him in there and was charging 50 cents for people to come and see him.
And later, a theater company in Chicago took the name Cardiff Giant, which I thought was a great name. And they were great. They did some great stuff. Yeah. Cardiff Giant.
It was fantastic. But that was very historical. That was a good name. I always appreciated that name.
Very obscure, like a bunch of crazy theater people.
Right. Then there's the Kensington Ruin Stone, RUNE, which was found in Minnesota in the 1890s. And the Kensington Ruin Stone, again, a farmer, it's always a farmer looking around, on his property found this stone tablet or stone post, and it had like Viking ruins, like Norse ruins on it. And it told the story about a group of Norwegians and Swedes in I think it was 60 or 1390s, had made their way in there, and they were attacked by, the local indigenous population. But it kind of, it kind of let Swedes know that they were already there. Norwegians know that they were already in before Columbus came. And that one's kind of, it's harder to test it, but just based on the ruins themselves, scholars have said, look, that's not the way they wrote back in 1390. And I mean, as far as like the vocabulary and everything. So again, that one is considered a hoax.
Interesting. I wonder who did that. God, to go to that effort. I mean, it's
a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
We have a lot of time. We have too much time on our hands, humans,
Yeah,
we just do.
Just as
anybody who plays video games knows that.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be carving a hoax for centuries from now.
What the fuck? I mean, it's just so weird.
Just go out to your garage and start chiseling away on a brick or something. Bury that thing. There's Drake's Plate. Have you ever heard of Drake's Plate?
No, I have not.
Francis Drake, the explorer, was supposed to have stopped in his journals. He talks about his crew had to stop somewhere on the western coast of North America and repair the ship for like 4 months or something. And before he left, he made a brass plate saying that he claimed it for England and nailed it to a post. In other words, the story was that was the English actually controlled California, is what they were saying. And in the 30s, a guy changing a tire found Drake's Plate. And sure enough, it's all written out like, I, Francis Drake, or, like claim this for, and it somehow worked back to a professor at, I think it was Cal State or someplace, or maybe, I don't want to, give cast aspersions on Cal State, but it may not have been Cal State, but it was like a university in California. He was a history professor. His whole life, he had wanted to find Drake's plate. And of course, here it is. He gets excited. He says, this is authentic. And then later on, they start looking at the actual brass, and they're like, well, this was mechanically rolled. And then they start looking at the alloys in the brass, and they're like, hey, they didn't make brass like that back in the 1500s.
Was it the professor who was he ever? Because I would look at him as the one who did it.
They think it was a joke played on him by an organization called Eclampus Vita, which is like you'll have to look it up. I mean, it sounds fascinating, but it's kind of a history. It's a secret society. They call it a secret society, but it's really put together. It was put together by miners back in the 1800s to kind of make fun of the Masons, make fun of the Elks, but Eclampus Vita, they always come up with some sort of alternate history as a joke. And so they think maybe, and he was a clamper. They call him clampers.
I'd like to be I'd like to be a clamper. That sounds like my kind of club. Are they the ones behind the Ark being in Nova Scotia?
I don't think so. I mean, you could look them up. They're hilarious.
All right.
Like all of their rituals and their regalia. It's fascinating.
And it's all a joke.
I mean, I don't want to speak for their organization, but just look it up and read about it. But apparently he was a clamper, and they think Eclampus Vita were playing a joke on him, and he took it seriously. And then they couldn't, nobody was willing to tell him, like, hey,
we were just joking.
We just made that in, Bob's garage. And then the other one is Shrouded Turin, which, again, Shrouded Turin is very contentious, like both sides. And no matter what tests are done on it to date it, I mean, obviously, there's a record of it from the 1300s. And even in the 1300s, the local bishop in France, where it first arrived, was saying this is a fraud, this is a hoax. But yet there's always a response to that. So I don't want to get into it because that's like a whole other thing, still very contentious.
That's like people who have, spilled their coffee and there's a Jesus coffee stain. And, you're not going to tell me that that's not,
Right. There's actually a term for that. It's like pareidolia, which is like where you see like something in the, in a shape in a cheese sandwich or something like that.
I did a show called 10 Items or Less, and our first episode was a water stain in the grocery store.
Was that your first episode?
I think it was.
Really? Wow. You guys dove right in.
We dove right in.
Let's get into the crazy stuff. And they signed off on that. They signed off.
Can you believe that? They wouldn't let me say nipple, but they signed off on a Jesus stain.
Right. Wow. But then this is all to bring us to today's topic. And that is probably the most famous hoax in anthropology that we know. And the thing is, the really good hoaxes, we don't know that they're hoaxes yet. So this is up to this point, this is a famous hoax in anthropology, and that's the Piltdown skull.
Okay,
and
here we go.
That's what we're talking about. We're going to sit back, fill up your drink, and let me take you back. No, but first, I think we need to discuss a little bit about hoaxes and why some of the reasons why people believe hoaxes, what makes a good hoax. If you're planning on hoaxing, you'll find this interesting. In 2015, Peter Hancock, who's a research psychologist, I think at the University of Central Florida. I should stop naming universities because people will be like, hey, that's not where I work.
Oh, screw them.
Yeah. Just go online and Google
it. Yeah.
I'm pulling this out of my...
Yeah. We're doing the best we can.
Right. But he wrote a book called Hoax Springs Eternal, The Psychology of Cognitive Deception. And hoax is kind of a word that gets thrown around a lot these days.
It seems like it around very much. I gotta tell you, I don't say the word hoax very often.
Like if you're at Starbucks, you're not like coffee's a hoax.
This coffee tastes like a hoax. People are like, what?
I want more whipped cream on this hoax. It seems like anytime somebody writes something bad about something on the internet, that's where it's like, it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
Right. No, that's why this is, in all seriousness, a great topic to discuss, because fact is such a contentious thing. Where as humans, we're exploring the fact. We're exploring the notion that, what is truth, and it turns out not a lot. Nothing is really totally true.
Right. Or there's a lot of layers of our own perception that is layered, put onto that truth.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say to everybody, if anybody writes anything bad about this podcast, I'm calling it a hoax. I'm telling you right now, it's a hoax.
Good work.
Yeah. I'm just setting it up right now. So watch out, you hoaxers. But Hancock talks about two types of deceptions. We have sensory deception, where we try to fool our senses, which is kind of like throughout history and evolution, that's been how we camouflage. How we've tried to survive is fooling our senses. Right. And the other thing he talks about is cognitive deception, which is where we try to fool the mind, not just the senses, but we try to fool the mind. And hoaxing or hoaxers will take advantage of a lot of these psychological processes and cultural biases that we have built into our mind,
right,
in order to get us to accept the hoax. And Francis Bacon, who was another philosopher and scientist back in the 1500s, in his book the New Organon, really talks a lot. This isn't something new for us with the internet or whatever. He even talks about how much people will believe, or how much belief and emotion influences what their idea of the truth is, or what they accept as the truth. And he even said, and there's a couple different he was writing in Latin, there's a couple different translations, but he said, human understanding is infused by desire and emotion, which give rise to wishful science. For humans prefer to believe what they want to be true. They therefore reject difficulties, being impatient of inquiry. So in other words,
I'm getting that tattooed on both our backs.
Just all the way. In Latin. In Latin. Let's keep it in the original, just so nobody can understand it except us. Or if we're ever at a pool with a bunch of Latin teachers, high school Latin teachers.
They'll all be so impressed with us as we're swimming.
They'll be like, you didn't use the causative case or something. My tattoo artist screwed up. So in other words, what Hancock is also saying, and also Francis Bacon in a way, is that hoaxes tend to give us what we already want. So the hoaxer will decide what, we want.
We want to see.
And the hoax will play upon that. And I think I already talked about pareidolia, which is the word Vonna gave it. Pareidolia, which is what you were talking about, where you see a shape.
Yep.
That's something that we already have. And those usually happen naturally. Another thing is apophenia, where we make cognitive connections between two unrelated facts, or two unrelated elements. So, for example, you'll be like, oh, well, I took my umbrella to work today, so of course it's going to rain. And there's really no connection.
No connection at all. If I get up and go to the bathroom during the Chiefs game, they're going to win the Super Bowl.
Right. Exactly. And we all do it, I think, but it's like
I did it yesterday.
So did I, and they won the game.
They won. I'm doing it every time now.
So the other thing, I mean, going on with what Hancock talks about is over hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, our brains have learned how to quickly process information. And so we can see, as you know, we're bringing in information all the time. We know we're sorting it. Like, is this useful? Is this not useful? Do I need this right now? Do I not need this right now? And if you kind of think about your day or driving to the store, chances are you don't remember everything you saw when you went to the store because your brain was saying, I only need to know this car coming at me or whatever. I don't need to know everything I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so what we do is, as we sort it, we put into our brains the things that we think are important so that we can go in there later and pull that out.
Mm-hmm. For later.
Right. Exactly. And if not, it's like we save it off to our hard drive, something that's important we may need. If we don't need it, I don't need to remember what cars were in the McDonald's parking lot when I drove by. I just clear that cache. I don't even need
Some
that
people
anymore.
don't. I have a friend who's a super recognizer.
Really?
Who she remembers every single face she's ever seen.
Oh.
And I was talking to her husband about it, and he said, yeah, it's so weird. We'll be in the grocery store, and she'll say, that guy over there was the guy at 7-Eleven last Thursday.
Oh. It must be
crazy?
Exhausting. Don't you? I mean,
she seems okay. She's pretty happy and she's fun.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, that's fascinating for the brain. We should talk to her sometime about that.
Yeah, she'd be a great guest. Yeah. She really would. I'll look into that.
Okay. And so again, Hancock comes back to, when most people think about how they're experiencing the world, they think that they're looking at the stuff that's coming in right now. Like, everybody likes to say, I go with the flow. I just respond to what life gives me. But really, our perception of the world is more complicated than that, because we're taking in that new information and then we're using that hard drive stored information to interpret what we're taking in and to give it significance.
Yes. And, like reading. Everybody thinks reading, you're just reading the letter of the word, but no, you're reading the whole word, and you're you're bringing into what you've just read, and you're looking forward to what you will be reading in a sentence to make it all make sense. It's a very complex thing.
Right. And it's going on without us even knowing it. We're not even thinking about that. And so it comes down to the way we're seeing the world then is this really complicated hybrid of new material and these stored biases, memories, and beliefs that we just have. And a lot of those we get from our culture. A lot of those we get from, from our own experiences. So a lot of times,
trial and error. When I touch this, it's hot. Therefore, it's always hot.
And so that's a reason why also, the way you experience the world may not be the same way someone else experiences the world.
Wait, what do you mean? Why do you say it like that? You.
I'm talking about you, because I've been with you and I know how you experience the world. And I'm like, that's not.
Well, I wouldn't be pointing any fingers.
Yeah, there's a lot of delusions going on in I would say I haven't been a victim of a hoax, but there's a lot of self-delusion. I have a lot of self-delusion.
Well, you may be a victim of a hoax and you don't know it. It was really good.
Possibly. I used to think I could play the harmonica.
I remember that.
It was a very embarrassing night in a bar one time in France where I realized I can't play harmonica. And so I'm wondering, I still say that was a hoax. Somebody perpetrated a hoax on me, because there's no way I would have done that on my own.
I might have been a part of that, because I feel like I told you that your harmonica sounded good at some point.
And looking back on it years later, I do think I was a good artist. I think I was just, I was before my time. I was. Have you ever seen the opera Wozzeck?
No.
It's atonal. Wozzeck is atonal, and it's tough to sit through. But I wouldn't even say you have to love opera. I would say you have to love Wozzeck to sit through it. But
you have to hate yourself.
Yeah, it's German expressionist, came out in the 20s, atonal. I feel like that was what my harmonica playing was. I think I was before my time. I was the Wozzeck of drunken harmonica players. But so the successful hoax will take advantage of these, will exploit these stored memories and biases we have. Mm-hmm. And just to go over some quick biases, we have confirmation bias as humans, where we tend to seek out information that confirms what we already believe.
Yes, which is that's where our country is right now.
Yeah, that's where a lot of people are. I mean, I know
that's Fox and MSNBC are making so much money.
It was there before that, but I will say that it's like we have a tendency psychologically that we already have an idea of what we think the world should be. Yeah. And then when we encounter evidence that supports that, we accept that immediately. Mm-hmm. And evidence that doesn't support that, we throw it out. Right. Or we don't. Right. And no matter how much information somebody can give us that it's one way, if it doesn't line up with what we think the world is already, we throw it out.
Yeah.
The other thing is wishful thinking, in that we want the hoax to be true. The hoax will give us something that we want, like the professor I was telling you about.
Yes. Or just the idea of mystery, of stuff that is unexplained. It's fun. I mean, there are movies about this, the Bigfoot, the idea that Bigfoot could be running around in Seattle somewhere is just delightful.
Yeah.
And to me.
And I would say, as an anthropologist, I would love there to be a bipedal primate up and that we haven't discovered. I would love it to be a, Homo erectus colony that's still up there. But the thing is, it's like, you need evidence. You need evidence. Yeah. And you got to be careful that when people are when you're finding the evidence that exactly lines up with what you want, you need to question it even more. Not saying it's not true, but I'm just saying you need to question it even more.
That's hard. That's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what Francis Bacon was saying, was like, we don't want to spend the time to do that. Right. To go in and question it. And another bias we have is the longer we spend trying to prove something, we become emotionally attached to it.
Yes. Yes.
And it's harder for us to let go of evidence, or let go of what we wanted so much. We spent the last 6 years working on our thesis, and then
Grover S. Krantz. Yeah. An anthropologist who believed that Bigfoot existed and just ended up driving around in a truck trying to shoot one.
Yeah. Which to prove it. I was going to bring him up. I'm going to save him for another.
Yeah.
I love Grover Krantz. And he was a very respected physical anthropologist. And again, he said, I will say quickly, remember, it was Cripplefoot that he said was so sophisticated that it couldn't possibly be hoaxed.
Yeah, that was a footprint, a famous Bigfoot footprint.
Right.
And he thought that proved it.
Right.
When in fact, no.
It's, I mean, you see, like with the Francis Drake, with all these other things, there are academics, PhDs that are out there as a practical joke trying to hoax people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's, you're up against a lot.
Right. You don't know. You don't know. Open mind, but you need evidence. Objective evidence.
I mean, we both take it for granted that we're good friends and that we care about each other. But we don't know.
Right.
Down inside your heart of hearts, what do I know? Right. How you really feel about me.
Revenge. I could want some deep revenge and go plant a, I don't know.
All this time?
Some trinket out there. I could, if you find Drake's plate, I'm going to plant Drake's Blake over across the street from your house and see what.
I'll buy it. I'll sell it. I'll sell that fucker.
Yeah. Or some scroll. I'll come up with some scroll and plant it.
Yeah, get a scroll. That's good.
And they're like, oh, wow. And I'll just sit
back.
back.
Swords are good.
When you find me just like telling you like, yeah, you need to publicize that. You need to go on TV with that thing. Like without me like giving you any pushback, and then you know something.
Wow.
Let's see. So emotions, once you take a stand on something, you become very emotional about it. It's harder, especially like publicly. Once you take a stand publicly for something, it's hard for you to let go of it because you don't want to look foolish. None of us want to look foolish.
No.
And then there's hindsight bias, where afterwards we don't like to admit that we could have fallen for something like that. So we'll justify if we find out something was a hoax, then in our mind we'll kind of dismiss it and be like, well, I never really believed it, or I never would have believed that. And I think a lot of hoaxes that people fall for, and I know I've had I knew somebody who was an art dealer in Chicago who had been some con men had come in and had pulled a switch on him, and again he had fallen for it, but yet he couldn't say anything. You know what I mean? Because that would have ruined his business.
So he went ahead and sold the forgery, knowing that it was a forgery.
They had like sold him something, and then when he opened it up, it wasn't the same painting or something.
I see.
So
I see. They did a switcheroo,
right? And again, it was like, well, I can't ever say anything because then that's my business that will be.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of hoaxes, when people are victims of hoaxes, you can't come out publicly and say like, oh yeah, that was, I did fall for that.
Right. And then there are all those that people never knew. I mean, I know this is a different category, but like the best con is the con where the person who was conned never knew they were conned.
Right. Yeah. Is it? I mean, yeah. I don't know. I think it would be hard. It takes a big person to say like, what, I was wrong. I've spent all this research. And I think it's even not just for a con, but it's like researchers, like you spend so much of your time trying to prove a certain thesis, or you have in the back of your mind a certain thesis. And then it's like you realize the evidence isn't showing that.
Yeah.
And you have to let it go. You have to go where the evidence takes you. But I think it's very hard for people to say like, I just spent 6 years and $200,000 in my thesis. You can't do that. You can't run a car on carrots or something, whatever it is. And the other thing that Hancock says is that you don't want your hoax. I mean, he's not giving it's not a how-to book on how to hoax, but he says the hoaxer doesn't want the hoax to be too perfect. Like you want gaps in the information so that people get involved, because once you get them actively doing their own research on it or actively filling in the blanks, then that plays on all of those biases that we just discussed.
Yes. Well, QAnon, a big part of that. People fill in the blanks. He said this, which really means this, that means that. Oh, this connects to that. And yeah.
So in other words, you want debate. You want people criticizing. You want people saying that's BS. That's not true. Because then the other person be like, well, why are you saying that? Because here's my... And then the lack of evidence becomes a thing. Well, they're trying to cover it up because of lack of evidence.
Yes.
And so Hancock makes a really good point in that you want people arguing about it. You want people emotionally involved in it, because he says, quote, it is apathy and neglect, not criticism, that kills a viable hoax.
That is absolutely true. And that's what Facebook has done.
Yeah.
Is given all of this fuel for people to stick their 2 cents in, which fuels it, makes it bigger, makes it, whether you're for or against it.
Right.
It just the arguing alone grows it.
Right. And the more you go out on a limb, the more you publish about whatever your point of view is, the harder it becomes for you to accept new information coming in, because that's just not the way psychologically we respond.
Because we're little simple primates who somehow invented all this crap, but it's bigger than we are. And soon, we'll create the robots who will kill us all, like every science fiction book, as we've said.
Right.
So it's coming.
That is going to happen. That is going to happen. I'm telling you. That's what the government doesn't want you to know.
Oh, there's many studies that show it will.
And this turns into some just completely out of control robot conspiracy theory. So let's move on to the Piltdown theory. So now we have a little bit of a background of what hoaxes are, and we can use that to kind of see how it applies to the Piltdown skull.
Agreed.
So in the late 1800s, this was only about 50 years after, I think Darwin published in like 1860 or something. So they were still trying to figure out like Darwin's theory of evolution, how that fit with human evolution, how that fit with the biblical history that was only, the world's 6,000 years old or something like that. People were still trying to decide, well, did the large brain come first and then bipedalism, walking on two legs, or did we start walking on two legs first? And then we came up with the large brain developed later. And then there were people that were saying, well, this must be a linear evolution, which is just very gradual. We went from apes and then slowly evolved into modern humans, in which case we should have some skulls in there of this intermediate place where you'd have like some ape and some human characteristics in the skull. And then people were starting to find they found the Neanderthal skull in Germany. They then found near Heidelberg, they found like another, which looks like it's now called the Homo heidelbergensis, which was like a ancestor of both humans and Neanderthals.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So people were just confused because they don't know. Like this theory of evolution is
so messy. It's not clean. It's not explainable. It's not simple at all.
Right.
It's messy.
Right. And where do these types of skulls fit in? You know what I mean? Are they are this modern human, not modern human? Who are they? But really what happened in England was scientists were a little upset. For one thing, again, going back to, they thought, well, we should be able to find a skull that has some human characteristics, some ape characteristics. And then secondly, what they were really upset about was none of these ancient skulls had been found in England. They'd all been found in like Belgium. They've been found
why
in Germany.
Why isn't there anything here in England?
Right. And kind of implicitly or explicitly, the idea was, hey, we're the most powerful country in the world at the time.
Yeah, but you're a little dinkball island with bad weather.
Well, I'm not, their idea was obviously we're the apex of culture.
Right.
And therefore, human evolution should have come through England at some point.
It kills them that it started in Africa or China.
Right. And when those were coming in, because there was a skull that was found in Java, and they were like, this can't be. We don't know what that is, but obviously it has nothing to do with the modern human, which had to come through Western Europe, specifically through England. And then, some people were even like, look, Charles Darwin, who even came up with this, was English. We obviously, this thing has to come through us. And so that's kind of the environment in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. People are still trying to figure out what human evolution actually was and how do you make sense with these other skulls. So then enter a guy named Charles Dawson in the early 1900s.
Here we go.
Now we're getting down to the Piltdown Meltdown. So Charles Dawson was a solicitor. He was a lawyer. He lived in Lewes in Sussex in southern England.
Yeah.
He worked in Uckfield.
Anybody who works up in Uckfield.
Right. Everybody knows those people from Uckfield. But he was an amateur geologist and paleontologist. And he had actually found some skulls, some dinosaur skulls, or not skulls, but some fossils and different.
Well, this is during that time when you literally, people were doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the golden age of archaeology, where,
Yeah, the gentleman goes out. Like my job, I'm a solicitor, but I also on the weekends I go out and I look for fossils. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of this, right? Exactly, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. So a lot of amateur, meaning that they weren't working at a university, but yet they were still finding a lot of stuff. And part of his duties was he was the steward of a place called Barkham Manor in the village of Piltdown, which is outside of Uckfield. And in 1908, he had been out there before, and he had seen this gravel pit by the side of it's literally was right next to the driveway going up to the manor. There was a gravel pit, and some workers would go in there and dig in the gravel, and then they'd use, kind of spread it around in the garden or the roads or whatever. And Dawson told them, hey, if you guys find anything, let me know, whatever you find. So they said in 1908, the farmer or the workmen came up to Dawson and they said, hey, we found these. We don't know what they are. We thought it was a coconut. And what it was they go, we broke it apart. And when they broke it apart, they realized it was part of a human skull.
Wait a minute. So they thought there was a coconut in a gravel pit in England?
Yeah.
Coconut? How would a coconut get there?
Exactly. To me, that's the real mystery.
That's the mystery.
But they said, they're digging in the gravel and they found this round object. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, hey, I probably would have done the same. They're like, hit it with your shovel,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. First thing, see if we can break it open.
Yeah. Get some of that coconut milk I hear about, whatever.
Speaking of, just a sidebar, I had a friend who brought a coconut back from somewhere and kept it in his room. And during a party, I think you might have been at this party. During a party, the coconut fell off a shelf and broke open and was full of maggots. Were you there at that party?
I think I seem to remember that.
And it was just horrid.
You never know you got to shake those things.
It's just nothing will clear a party out faster than a bunch of maggots.
Where did he bring it? Did he bring it back from someplace?
Somewhere.
Oh, God, that would be awful.
Ooh, it was awful. We were like, is that rice? Nope. That's not rice. Anyway, sorry to derail you.
Pina coladas, everybody. All right, so they show it to Dawson, and Dawson says, this is a human skull. This is part of a human skull. It's not a complete human skull, but it's part of a human skull. So then, like 4 years later, Dawson writes to his friend, who's some guy he had given fossils to before, a man by the name of Arthur Smith Woodward, keeper of geology at the British Museum. And again, Woodward, very respected man. He was a geologist, though. And Dawson told him, hey, I found down at Piltdown, I found these parts of a skull. And I also found some eoliths. With eolith is, there was a big movement in the late 1800s where people thought they were finding stone tools. And it just kind of looks like a tool was made. But yet you don't have certain things. Like if you make a stone tool out of flint, there's certain characteristics you can look at on the stone tool to tell that was made by a human or that was made by just rubbing against another rock or something.
Yeah,
but there was a whole thing.
If a rock falls off a mountain and chips, that doesn't mean it's a stone tool.
Right, exactly. But the thing is, there were people that were really into eoliths, and they would find eoliths everywhere. And it's kind of like the person who every time they go out and you're out for a hike or something, like, look, it's a arrowhead, and you're like, well, you have to say, like, is there a bulb of percussion? Do you have pressure flaking on it? oh, it's an arrowhead. Look at the shape of it. It's kind of the same thing. So there was a real people who were into eoliths. But anyway, but he said, I found some eoliths there, and I also found some paleoliths, which are actually, we can tell that they were made by humans. So this got Woodward kind of excited about it. So in June 1912, Dawson, Woodward, and also Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who he was a Jesuit student. And Pierre Teilhard went on to become, he's like a mystical writer. Like people are like really follow him. Pierre
Interesting.
Teilhard. And Teilhard, I don't want to get off track on it, but it's he was a Jesuit priest and a geologist, but he felt like we were in a theistic evolution. So he believed in evolution, that we were going from matter evolving through humans into complete spirit. So it's another thing. Yeah, yes. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I
love that.
And I put some books from Pierre Teilhard on the list, but it's very fascinating to read from a Catholic Jesuit priest who's very mystical of like where we're going. So he was into evolution. He believed that there were all kinds of different, groups or like different lineages of possible hominids, but they went extinct, and the humans, we were going through our brains and then we're going up into pure spirit.
Yep.
But anyway, when they went out there in June, they found some more bits and pieces of skull, and they also found, I think Teilhard found like an elephant molar, prehistoric elephant molar out there.
Taylor's like, look what I...
Yeah,
Teilhard. Who brought him?
It literally right off the road, and you see photos of it, and it's basically Dawson, Woodward, Teilhard, this old guy, I can't remember, Venus was his first name, but he was like the workman out there that they got to shovel. They would make Venus do all the shoveling.
Yeah.
And
then over here, Venus.
And then there was a goose named Chipper, who they said the goose would follow them around when they were working in the pit. So every photo has Chipper the goose.
Jesus Christ. Oh, God.
So,
Venus, did Chipper eat my sandwich?
So you
Taylor
see them
says, no, it was me. It doesn't matter, though, in the end. We're all turning into pure energy. Jesus Christ, Hilar.
Even Chipper,
Chipper better watch out. We're going to be eating him tomorrow.
So at the end of June 1912, Teilhard's gone back to France. Woodward and Dawson are there working in the pit.
Yeah.
And they find...
Now they can get down to business.
Right. Like, oh, thank God Teilhard's gone. He just won't stop about going and evolving into pure energy.
He just won't shut up.
Just ask for a ride back to the hotel. So they found, at that time, half a jawbone that was very ape-like. And not everybody can see it, but it was this part of the jawbone. It was just half of a jawbone. Okay.
Yes.
So they found pieces of a skull here. Okay.
He's pointing to the head, for those of you just listening, the top of the head.
Right. They found pieces of skull.
And
then they found the right side of a mandible that was ape-like. And what was interesting, it was missing the condyle, which is the condyle had been broken off somehow.
What's the condyle?
The condyle is this part of the jaw that is where the tendons attach the mandible to the cranium.
I see.
To the maxilla. Okay. So, and that's kind of how you can tell how something would fit together. So conveniently, that's part's missing.
Broken off. Interesting.
But everybody was like, oh, well, it was probably just broken off naturally.
Darn. If only we had that, but we don't. But we can still infer.
Exactly. And that's where they were like, well, that jawbone, that ape jawbone was in the same layer that those fragments of the cranium were. So they must be associated, because the odds of those just ending up next to each other is so astronomical. That jawbone must go with that cranium. And that's what started everything. And so
I wonder what Venus was thinking while they were putting all that together. I thought it was a coconut the whole time. What do I know?
I just want to go to the pub, Chipper and me need a drink.
Yeah.
So, but that's where it provided them with exactly what the missing link was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a human type skull, modern human type skull, with an ape-like jaw. Wow. And it was just perfectly fit together. And so in December 1912, Dawson and Woodward present their findings to the London Geological Society. They call the find Eoanthropus dawsoni, which means Dawson's Dawn Man.
Dawsoni.
Yeah. And so, but the press was like, this was it. It's like, obviously, this is a major find. This is the main line of human evolution, did run through England. So the press went crazy and was calling it the first Englishman. We finally found it. And there were certain people at the time were like, wait a second, what? You just found you found an ape skull. That's obviously an ape skull next to fragments of a human bone. And of course, they had an answer to everything. It's like, well, then you're saying that there were like apes here in England at the same time as prehistoric humans. And we all know that apes disappeared millions of years ago in England, like 1 million years ago. And so, they just had an answer for it.
Yeah.
And everybody was arguing about what the skull meant in terms of the science, but nobody was ever questioning the authenticity of the skulls. Even the people that were saying that was a fossilized ape skull never said that skull may not be genuine. They all thought it was genuine fossils, but they never questioned whether they were just saying that doesn't go together, but nobody ever questioned whether or not those were genuine fossils. And so then Woodward takes those like 9 fragments of skull and that half a jawbone, and he kind of imagines and makes a reconstruction of it. And the reconstruction kind of fits what he felt. The missing link. Of
course, it's art at this point. It's an artist, a conceptual art piece based on his observations.
Right. He releases it. It's exactly what he felt the missing link would be. It was a very small brain case with a very large protruding ape-like jaw. And
but
then
not
after
a
that,
9-inch jaw like a penis, like a
yeah.
Right.
Now that's something to find. That's something.
That's a find
in a gravel pit outside of Uckfield.
I'm trying to think if there's a gravel pit near my house I should be digging through.
Go out there, just start digging around. You never know. Go over to Griffith Park and start just digging a hole. See what you can find. Another guy named Arthur Keith, who he was another anthropologist. They then they made casts of the skulls, and they let people like kind of look at them themselves. But again, with these casts, then people were assembling their own type of what the skull would look like. So Arthur Keith, he felt like the big brain came first, so he put together the cast, and of course his version has a big brain and the jaw's a little bit tighter in. It's not so ape-like. And what's interesting in hindsight, looking back on it, is whenever somebody questioned something about Woodward's reconstruction, within the next summer, they would find an artifact or a piece of bone that would answer that to support Woodward's. So like people like Darwin had said, like the human lineage would have like a large canine teeth, most likely, kind of like an ape. At some point, we would have had large canine teeth. And so the next summer, of course, Pierre Teilhard is back from France. Boy. And in August 1913, Teilhard finds a canine tooth.
Oh.
in the pit, and it fits exactly into the jaw, just like Woodward had said.
Wow.
And then the other thing was people were saying, well, maybe this was just one individual with some cranial deformity of some sort.
Right.
And maybe it wasn't like a whole species. Well, what happens? 1913, Dawson says he's found other skull fragments away from Piltdown in a place called Barkham Mills. And then in 1915, he says, I found some other up in Sheffield Park. But he never tells people exactly where he was looking up there. So he's just saying, hey, I found these fragments of skull. But again, people were like, oh, okay, well, that means that it wasn't a single individual. He's actually finding pieces that are similar to what we found at Piltdown. Again, nobody's questioning the authenticity of it. So in August 1916, Dawson dies. And what's interesting is when Dawson died, no other finds were found at Piltdown. That should have been something that should have...
He just had a nose for bone. Dawson.
It's a small little
Dawsoni.
ditch right next to the driveway. And yet nobody ever went there to do a full excavation on it. After Dawson dies, nothing else is found there. But for 40 years, people kind of accepted. They were like, these are true fossils. Right. It's real. We don't know where it fits in, but it's real. And so then what happens is they start finding more skulls across the world. And they realize these skulls are showing, we did have a small brain case. Like in Africa, they found skulls. Raymond Dart in 1923, I think it was, found an Australopithecus. And it was like, we did have a small brain case when we started walking on two legs. And then suddenly it was like, well, how does that, they just didn't know how this Piltdown skull fit in. And then in 1953, three guys, Joseph Weiner, who was an anthropologist from South Africa, happened to be working in London. Kenneth Oakley, who was another, I think Oakley was a paleontologist, and a guy named Wilfred LeGros Clark, who was a anatomist. They were at I think Oakley and Weiner were at a convention in London. And at dinner, they were talking about the Piltdown. Somehow the Piltdown skull came up.
Yeah, it does all the time. I've been at many dinner parties.
Bring that up.
You guys talking about the Piltdown?
Yeah. After this podcast, bring it up. Try it out. It really gets a conversation going.
$10 if you can tell me the name of the goose that was following him around.
But anyway, Weiner said in his memoirs, he says he went home that night and he kept thinking about the Piltdown skull. He was like, wait a second, why didn't anybody ever go back and excavate that thing? If it was so important, why didn't they do a full excavation? And he said it's kind of interesting to read his process, but the more he kept thinking about it, he was like, look, there's only one way all of those items would fit together. And that's if somebody had planted them, if they really didn't go together. And he was kind of embarrassed to come up with it, or he was afraid to come up with it, because you're kind of calling out all of these old academics for not questioning
heroes at this point.
Exactly. You're questioning like why they believed it or what, he just said, it's very interesting. If you get a chance to read Joseph Weiner's memoirs, and kind of see how he comes to it, because it's like him. I just imagine him like back at his apartment afterwards, or at his house in Oxford after this dinner, and like, you know what, it's got to be a fake. They have to be placed there on purpose. And so he went back and he asked Oakley to do. Oakley was famous for doing fluorine testing, and fluorine is found in groundwater. So when you do fluorine testing, bones that are buried in the ground will have, for a longer time, will have a larger amount of fluorine. And so he asked Oakley to go test the original Piltdown skull for fluorine. And what Oakley found was both the jaw and the cranium pieces didn't have that much fluorine, which means that they were They weren't ancient. They were modern. And even like the molars, the elephant molars, all of those other fossils had high levels of fluorine, which means that they weren't buried at the same time as the jawbone and the cranium pieces. And even more important, the cranium piece and the jawbone piece didn't have the same amount of fluorine, which if they were the same individual.
Right.
Yeah. So then it all starts.
Impossible.
Right. Because if they were buried at the same time, they would have the same amount of fluorine. So then they start looking closer. They drill into the jaw. And Weiner talks about when they drill into the jaw, you could smell burning organic material, meaning that it wasn't even a fossil. It was. And then they did microscopic analysis on the jaw itself and realized that the teeth had been filed down to make it. You could see little scratch marks on it to make it look like it fit with that skull. So again, not only was the condyle missing, but somebody had filed the teeth.
What end? Why?
Exactly. Nobody knows. Nobody knows why they did it.
Go to all of that for what? To what end?
Right. And again, it's like, was it for money? Nobody made any money. Was it for a joke to play a hoax on somebody? They tested the x-rays of the tooth that was found, and they realized a hole had been drilled in it, and it had been filled with sand to make it look like a fossil. And then, like, whoever did it must have been running out of time because they painted it with brown paint.
Oh my God. But why?
Yeah. It could go on.
Was it Dawson?
That's where we're at right now. Is once they realized that, they also looked at radiation and realized, hey, the elephant molar actually based on the radiation, it came from Africa. It didn't come from England. They had found that
the Frenchman just dropped that in there.
Just
out of his pocket. Excuse me. Hey, guys, look over there. Where did the goose go?
Right.
And then just drop it in there. Cover it up with your foot.
So there were all these things that they found, like a digging stick they realized had been cut with a metal knife, which obviously they didn't have metal knives.
Yeah, why would you need a digging stick if you had a metal knife?
Right.
Why don't you just use the knife?
Hindsight. It's the hindsight balance. Now it seems so easy for us to say it. But that's what it was. And when they announced it, people were the scientific community were kind of upset, but they were also relieved because they could never figure out how this crazy skull with a modern cranium and an ape-like jaw fit into human evolution. So they were kind of relieved by it. But then afterwards, after it was all exposed, Weiner went back to Lewis, which is the town that Dawson was from, and he started asking around questions, and people were like, oh, that guy, he plagiarized. He wrote a history of Hastings Castle, and he plagiarized, and then, he misrepresented himself as a member of the Sussex Geological Society to buy the Lewis Castle for himself,
Wow.
And then people
a fraud, a shim sham man. I don't even know. Why though? Why?
But the thing is, he had actually found real fossils. That's the whole thing. So now no one ever confessed. Okay. No deathbed confession. No one ever said. And so now, there's all kinds of, it's a whole whodunit, you go through and you look at all of the academics, you look at all of the people, and people are like, was it Dawson? But what was Dawson getting out of it? He didn't, I guess fame, who knows? Was it Woodward? Woodward had to know that if this was found out, he would be disgraced as an academic. Some people think Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was doing it, maybe as a joke. Arthur Conan Doyle even comes up. The author of Sherlock Holmes. People are like, he was having an argument with some other anthropologist about spirituality or spiritualism, and maybe Arthur Conan Doyle did it just to show how foolish these scientists are or something.
I like that.
Yeah, and then another guy who has a pretty convincing argument is he was Ian Langham, who died in 1980 at a young age, but he was also an anthropologist from Australia, but he had gone through Arthur Keith, that guy who had come up with the second reconstruction, had gone through all of his journals. And he was saying there's just discrepancies in what Keith is saying, when he met Dawson, when he didn't meet Dawson, when he first heard about the Piltdown, So Langham, his argument was he thought Keith had done it. But again, it's like, well, why? Nobody knows why they would do it. Was it a joke that got out of hand? Like, I'm just going to play this joke on Dawson?
Too much time on your hands. It's the reason that I've played, all those video games.
Yeah.
I don't have to hunt and gather anymore. So what do you do with all that time? You do weird stuff. Everybody's doing it.
Right. And it could be, everybody kept saying, well, you had to really know chemistry because all the bones were stained the same color with iron. And even they tried to stain the tools that were found there.
Jesus.
So somebody with a little bit of knowledge, and then years later, like 40 years later, somebody was like, I remember going into Dawson's office and he had a bunch of chemicals out. But, it's like any murder, or like not murder mystery, but a mystery. It's like, you can't remember decades later what someone was doing. But anyway, so in conclusion.
Wow. This is a good one.
What do we talk about for our conclusion? It's like, in terms of a hoax, Piltdown was the perfect hoax.
It was. And in a sense, the hoaxes of this world are as important as the discoveries.
Right.
Because truth and fact, it doesn't exist. It exists to a certain percentage. Like, they've never proved, yes, but a large percentage of us have chosen to believe that based on certain studies and evidence, but there's never, ever, ever black and white to anything.
Yeah.
So the hoaxes sort of, in a sense, like offer us the notion that, hey, nothing's true. And the science offers us the notion that everything is provable, when in fact neither of them tell the whole story.
Right. And I always one thing I learned in grad school was, like, you always, look, I want all of this. I would love there to be a Bigfoot. I'd love there to be whatever. But all you can say as a scientist is, based on the evidence we have right now, this is the conclusions we can draw. So scientists are always open for new material. So this idea of like, well, scientists don't know everything. It's like, no, but they want to know everything. They're looking for new material. They're open to new evidence to come in. It's when we reject that evidence that doesn't agree with what we want it to be.
Yeah, based on our limited scope, because we've been on Facebook or reading stuff, but our ego is such that, I've figured it out. I know.
Right.
I had a friend who was going through a divorce, and he was always telling me about what his lawyer wasn't doing right, and how he got her to do stuff against her advice. And I said to him, like, dude, either fire the lawyer and get another lawyer, or do what the lawyer says. You're screwing it up on both sides.
Right. Yeah.
You're out in no man's land.
Yeah.
Doubting your lawyer when you don't even have a law degree or anything close to it.
Yeah.
But logically, this is what I'm like. Logically, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Logically.
But you can see how that leads us to, like, that ego and emotion.
Yeah.
And no matter what you tell him, if it doesn't agree with what he wants to hear, it's like, well, John doesn't know what he's talking about, or whatever.
That's right.
The lawyer doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's right. I know.
Yeah.
But that's why I want to become a chomper. What are they called? The chompers?
Eclampus vita.
Clamper.
A clamper. You should look it up.
I'm going to be a clamper. Just fuck shit up. I love chaos. This is one of the things that people who hate LA don't realize. I love LA, and the reason I love LA is because it's a total mess. It's just chaos. It's strip malls, and then mountains, and then rich people, and poor. It's just a vomit of mankind. And that chaos, to me, feels the closest to what is true. What we are, which is just there's nothing organized or protected or it's all moving. Everything's moving. The ground is shifting underneath us. There's nothing to hang our hat on.
Wow.
And I love that. I love it.
Do you think that's all large cities, or do you think that's just LA? Like, do you feel that in New York as well? That it's New York is kind of like everybody seems to know like where you go and what.
Yeah, it's not as messy. I mean, they all have elements, but I've never been to a place. I hear Mexico City is like that. I'd love to spend some time in Mexico City, but it's just a mess. LA is just a mess, and that's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
That there is no there. You know.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Come out and visit again. I miss you. Come on out.
I miss LA too. I love LA as well.
Yeah.
For the same reason. LA is not what everybody thinks it is. I think it's
some
of the most lovely people I've ever met.
Yeah. Nobody knows what LA is. That's what's so great about it. There's no definition. It's just a vomit of mankind. It's a gravel pit.
Yeah.
Filled with broken mandible bones.
Get your trowel and get out there. Get out in your backyard and start digging around.
Find your Venus, your internal Venus, and start shoveling for coconuts.
And Chipper. Don't forget Chipper.
And Chipper.
Oh, Chipper. All the photos, if you ever go online, look around for it. You'll see,
That's the funniest part of the whole story.
And the intrepid Chipper right there in the pit with him.
Just kills me. It kills me.
All right.
Wonderful.
So that was fun. I think we learned something, hopefully. And remember, any bad comments, I'm calling a hoax.
That's right. They're not true. Fake news.
All right.
Well, this is human number 2.
And this is human number 1.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.